everyone, welcome to Commander Pop Culture. If you like the video, be sure to subscribe so you'll be notified of future content. Welcome to my 8th video about Commander Master spoilers. I'm going to talk about the Enchantress deck next. Alright, first off we got Enchantment, Hand of Erebos. I covered her in the first episode, but that was a while ago. So she has Menace. Other enchantment creatures you control have Menace. Whenever it enters or attacks, exile a non-aura enchantment from your graveyard and create a token copy, except it's a 3/3 zombie. That's pretty sweet. When this was first spoiled, I thought of a way to build this best would be enchantment stacks pieces and locking people out of the game as long as you can until you win. And then if someone should remove those stacks pieces, you could always get them back with your commander. Let's look at the other 9 special cards that came out. Battle at the Hell Vault. For each player, exile 1 target non-saga, non-land permanent that player controls until this saga leaves the battlefield. Not a fan of those because it's a temporary band-aid, and then on the final tick, you make an 8/8 angel with flying vigilance indestructible. 1-on-1 seems fine. In a regular 4-person game of Commander, not so much. I have this fear of like you be forced to exile things with ETB triggers, or you'll be causing a protection for a board wipe that needs to happen. The best part is the final trigger of making an 8/8 angel. I don't know if it's good enough, as weird as that is to say. And I also don't want to invest the mana. If the exiling of permanents was a permanent thing and not something that you return, then I'd love this card. Would play it in most of my white decks if that was the case. Boon of the Spirit Realm. It's a 5 mana anthem effect. Whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield, put a spirit counter on this, or put a blessing counter on it, and then creatures you control get +1/+1 for each blessing counter on Spirit Realm. I don't really like this card too much. It kind of synergizes with your commander because it turns your enchantments into creatures eventually. I feel like this deck in particular is about playing enchantments that put bodies into play outside of your commander. Onto Spirit Dancer. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under control, may create a token copy of it. This only happens once each turn. Man, for 5 mana, it's cool. If you play it on turn 5, it's a do nothing because you obviously won't have an enchantment to follow up with it because you'll run out of mana. That rate's pretty cool. You basically double the mana value of your first enchantment spell once a turn. So if you find a way to give your enchantments flash, this could be a fun card. I'd say it's strictly a casual card and not so much a competitive one. Cacophony of the Unleashed. When it enters the battlefield, and if you cast it, destroy all non-enchantment creatures. Whenever Cacophony or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, till that turn, it becomes a 6/6 Nightmare God with Menace, Death Touch. It's still enchantment. It's a crappy board wipe. When I want my board wipes, I want them cheap. And if they cost more, they better do something special. And the specialty, a asymmetrical wipe, and making this into a body is not worth the extra cost. I don't like it. Demon of Fate's Design. Flying Trample for 6 mana. Once during each of your turns, you may cast an enchantment spell by paying life equal to mana cost, rather than paying its mana value. That's kind of nice. For 3 mana, you could sack an enchantment. Demon of Fate's Design gets +X/+0 until on a turn where X is sacrificed enchantment's mana value. I don't really care about that ability. I also don't like that it's 6 mana. For 6 mana, I could win the game. And this is just a value card. Ghoulish Impetus. This is another card that's part of that original 5. Gets +1/+1. Death Touch and is goated. So you enchant something that's not yours. And then when it dies, you get to return this to the battlefield to beating the next end step. That's really nice. Most of the impetuses suffer from, being a one-time use.
It's the gift that keeps on giving the whole year.
Kind of a thing. But this gets to come back and go to a new thing. And that's pretty relevant. Composer of the Spring. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a land from your hand on the battlefield tapped. If you control 6 or more enchantments, instead you may put a creature or land from your hand onto the battlefield. That's a cool satyr. You get the ramp, and at a certain point, you can start cheating your creatures into play. Yeah, and it's 2 mana, has a good stat block. Probably the best one out of these 9 that I've seen so far by a large margin. Next boon, Behemoth. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the total mana value of non-creature enchantments. In a perfect world, you pay max to 2 green for this spell. It's a 10/10 with trample. It's a big boy. It has the evasion to boot with the immense stat block. And then for 2 mana, you could sack an enchantment and give it indestructible till end of turn. Makes it a little hard to answer. I think this is a stellar one-on-one kind of a card. I don't know if it's kind of has the same story as Battle of Hellvault. Narcy, Fable Singer. Whenever you sacrifice enchantment, draw a card. Whenever the final chapter ability of Saga you control resolves, each opponent loses X life, you gain X life. That X is that Saga's mana value. Man, of all the Saga commanders, the two that come to mind would be her and Tom Bombadil. I feel like this chick would beat Tom like a redheaded stepchild. This is just so much better than Tom. I have a buddy that says Tom is the greatest thing in the world, and if he still says that after seeing this creature, I'd like to little competition.
Let's get ready to rumble!
To see who is the truly better Saga commander. From these, I like 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 for sure that I could see myself playing in just random decks. And then I have some like fringe picks like Ondu, Spirit Dancer, and Nyxborn Behemoth. Maybe Demon of Fate's Design, making it 7. I'm not entirely too impressed. I don't see a staple in here. Anakthea and Narcy I could see being played as commanders. I think they are worthy of that slot. And then the card I see getting played the most is by far Composer of Spring. I think this card's really good. Go over the creatures. Archon of Sun's Grace. Okay, so when I was talking about the feel of the deck, remember when I was saying I'm getting vibes that this is all about going wide due to enchantments because of that Anthem effect. Archon fits that build pretty well. You make a 2/2 Pegasus every time an enchantment enters the battlefield. Helyad the Sun Crowned. What people don't realize is his activated ability puts a 2/1 enchantment creature into play, and it gives your creatures vigilance, so relevant and makes sense in this deck. Mesa Enchantress, perfect. With Enchantress decks, you want to run them all. Every single one you can. I'm glad to see this in here. I hope that has the other, I think there's like 3 or 4 more, but there's at least 3 other enchantresses that cost 3 mana, and I hope they make the list. Starfield Mystic, coupon for enchantments, and then whenever enchantment dies, put a counter on it. I don't think people play this for the +1/+1 counter. Even in my enchantress decks, I didn't find myself playing Starfield Mystic that often. I'd rather play a rock where I could use that to cast anything. Doomwake Giant. This is kind of like an oldie and a goodie. Whenever an enchantment comes in, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 till end of turn. So if you could string a lot of enchantments into play, it's a one-sided board wipe for your opponents. I don't see it that often, probably because it's expensive. It'd be really hard to cast this and cast enchantments afterwards, and a significant amount of them to, influence the board in any meaningful way. Yeah, 99 cents. That makes sense. Erebos the Bleak-Hearted. I wonder if they're going to put a lot of the gods in this deck because they're just difficult to remove permanents, and that would be pretty darn annoying to play against. I don't know if anybody, you could let me know in the comments below, but if you've ever played against a god tribal deck, it's obnoxious. Not because of what they do, it's because difficult to remove. Arasta of Endless Web. Whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery, you get a 1/2 spider. It's an enchantment creature, and it makes more creatures, fitting the go wide strategy here. Corsair Crewfix, it's got a big butt and blocks things. I don't like showing people the top of my library. This is no Oracle Moldiad. You only get to play 1 land a turn, so it's just not strictly as good. Dryad of the Listening Grove. This, however, gives you a bonus land drop and makes it so your lands tap for anything. Fun facts about this card is this and Prismatic Omen gives your lands every basic type. So if you're running a Valakut strategy, I don't know if you guys know what Valakut does, but it basically says if you have 5 or more mountains in play, with every mountain you play, it does 3 damage. Dryad and Prismatic help you cheat your way to those triggers. Same with Emeria, the land that carries about 7 planes, so you can return stuff to play. This also helps with those strategies. Eidolon Blossoms, all right. That's another Enchantress Stone. Draws every time an enchantment comes into play, including itself. Herald of Pantheon.
Oh, wow. We got coupons from the market.
Coupons? Mm-hmm. I love coupons. Yay, coupons.
For enchantments, Sanctum Weaver. This is a pretty badass enchantment creature. It's the dad's X mana of any color to your mana pool, where X is the number of enchantments you control. It's integral. It's a creature with a better activation than Serra Sanctum. They would never put Serra Sanctum in this deck because that's a reserveless card. Citizen Champion, awesome. Another Enchantress. That's 3 so far. Verdian Enchantress, that's 4. There's one more. There's a green-white one. Let's see if they got that in here. Okay. Sithis. There you go. Spirited Companion. I feel like you could run something better. All it does is draw you a card. It just fits the bill of being an enchantment creature. Mind Wreck Harpy facilitates that bottom trigger of your commander because it makes you mill 3 cards from the top of your library. I just feel like there are better ways of doing this if you want to fill your graveyard up with enchantments. I'd rather play Hermit Druid. It's 2 mana less, and you put a heck of a lot more into your graveyard than what this can do. Destiny Spinner makes sense. Makes your enchantments uncounterable, and it turns a land into a scary trampler. Okay, this is a huge waste of a creature slot. It's only in here because it's an enchantment creature. Just because it's an enchantment creature doesn't mean you have to put it in the deck. Like, what is this? I don't want it. I don't want to see this thing. Nestian Wanderer. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield, you look at the top 3 cards. You may put a land from among them into your hand. Put the rest of them bottom of your library. This guy is nice because you are guaranteed a land drop. For my past, I think I just went with just raw card advantage to the point where I didn't need this because the likelihood of me drawing into it is high. So it's just ended up getting cut. But it's fine in here because it's a sealed deck where it's supposed to be affordable to everybody else. Jukai Naturalist, another coupon. Dang, I didn't know there were so many enchantment coupons. So far I've counted 3. Nyx Weaver, it's pretty nice because, again, you're facilitating the mill strategy, and then you eventually could exile this or turn a card from your graveyard to your hand. And it's an enchantment creature. Satyr Enchanter, this would be the 6th Enchantress. Man, I haven't played in a while because I forgot about Sithis, and there are so many card advantage enchantresses now. Even though they're missing one of the best ones, Argothian, that's still a lot of card advantage. That's 6 cards dedicated to drawing just off of enchantments. How many enchantments does this deck have? It's a little bit more because most of the creatures in this pile are also enchantments. So let me count that up. There are 15 enchantment creatures in here, and some of them even make enchantment creature tokens. I was ragging on the extremely high CMC spells in this deck. I'm starting to feel like the coupons are pretty necessary. I never used them because I was already playing efficiently cheap enchantments in my enchantress decks. Whoever designed this deck was kind of admitting to the folly of the deck and fixing its problems. So good job on whoever was designing that part of the deck. Shaman, Sorcery, and Artifacts. Let's see. Felidar Retreat, Shaman that facilitates going wide. Grasp of Fate. This is one of my all-time favorite removal spells. Even though I hate on like O-ring effects, the fact that this scoops up 3 permanents for 1 spell, it's worth my card slots. And I play this in pretty much every white deck.
Staples. That was easy.
Yeah, $8 for a reason, folks. Try it out if you don't have it. Sigil of the Empty Throne. We're going wide for casting enchantments, and the tokens are nothing to scoff at. They're big boys. Starfield Nyx. Okay. So I was hoping they were going to put stuff like this in the deck. Starfield Nyx and Opal Essence, they're the enchantments that turn your enchantments into bodies. Since the going theme is that these enchantments are really expensive CMC-wise, they're also going to be really big bodies, and they're going to have huge stat blocks. And Starfield Nyx is better than Opalescence, even though it has a slightly more problematic requirement to animate them all. You get to return enchantments from your graveyard to the battlefield, which is loved. The only thing that you have to be a little wary about, though, is once your enchantments are creatures, they're vulnerable to board wipes. You kind of don't want to play Starfield Nyx or Opalescence until you're about to alpha strike people to death. Pro tip, if you've never played Enchantress before. Cunning Rhetoric. Whenever an opponent attacks you or one or more planeswalkers control, exile the top card of that library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled. Unique card advantage. It disincentivizes people from attacking you, because if they do, you get the take cards from top of people's libraries and cast them. I've never personally run it because it's a 3 mana do nothing that's dependent on what other people are doing. In my experience with these decks, you are pillow forwarding up and they can't attack you anyways, and you're not going to get those triggers. It probably works just fine in this deck though. It's just based on the cards that Curator picked. Dreadhorde Invasion. I hate this card in this deck. I don't know why it's here. Because the deck is clearly all about making more bodies from enchantments. This is making one really big body. I don't understand why it's in here. Abundance. This card's kind of cool. So say you had an Enchantress, you cast Abundance, it enters, you draw from the ETB. Abundance sees that draw trigger, and then the Abundance trigger happens. Whenever you draw a card, You choose land or non-land, and you reveal cards from the top until you reveal one of the chosen kind, and you put that in your hand, and the other cards revealed on the bottom of your library. Abundance is good when you're playing against stacks too, because if someone plays a Notion Thief or Narset, this replaces the draw effect and turns it into a reveal and put in your hand. And then it guarantees you drawing gas. Enchantress Presence, that's the 7th Enchantress in this deck. Mending and Dominaria, it's an alright saga. You mill 2, return a creature from your graveyard to hand. You do that in the first 2, and then on the final one, you return all lands from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it's kind of like a Splendid Reclamation. You just have to wait for it. I honestly would find the first 2 ticks to be more valuable, but all of them are actually really good. Sandward Convergence, remember when I was saying that you kind of pillow fort your way so no one can attack you? This is one of those cards, so it kind of is a non-bow with Cunning Rhetoric. But it also makes 5/5 bodies. Battle Breck card. Now this is a saga I like. It's nice and cheap, and it puts bodies into play. And you get to reanimate this with your commander. Hell yeah. I like the theme here. Oh, I didn't realize that the final ability is kind of sick. For any number of artifact tokens or creature tokens with different names, for each of them, you create a token that's a copy of it. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Season's Harvest sorcery that doubles your tokens in play. This comes very close because the tokens have to be different names. Yeah, I think you will get some good value off that final tick, especially when you reanimate it and do it again. Holy cow. Put a culling ritual in this? This is one of my all-time favorites CDH cards. I don't know what value it has in a casual deck, though. The reason why I play Culling Ritual is to deal with fast mana and ruin people's early game strategies. Because I think if you and your friends all buy one of these decks and you end up with a spell, you're not going to hit very much off of it. But in CDH games, oh yeah, I've cast a spell and generated enough mana to cast a spell 4 times over. It's a pretty wicked card. Mirari's Wake. Oh, jeez. It's hard to believe that this is a $5 card. I remember when I was 20, but it's really good. Fixes your mana problems with this really high curve. Makes your mana tap for double, essentially. It's technically not double. You add an additional. Be wary of that when you're playing Mirari's Wake, and multiple other ways to make your lands tap for more. And it makes your creatures have +1/+1. It's an anthem. It may not look it, but this card is extremely dense for this deck strategy. Path to Exile, it's cheap, love it. Extinguish All Hope.
Literally?
It's an expensive board wipe. The only thing that sucks about this is your enchantment coupons are not going to help you cast this spell. It may be one-sided and worth like trying. Nah, I don't like it. I'd rather play anything else. Kodama's Reach for fixing. Arcane Signet. Soul Ring, an O-Ring, a slightly worse O-Ring. Has Flash, that's what you're paying a little extra mana for. Love Song of the Night. I don't like helping my opponents draw cards, but the fact that you get to choose who draws can mean a difference. You just pick the weakest player at the table to draw with you. Make a token, so it fits that theme, and then you get to put a counter on 2 target creatures. That's kind of irrelevant. The best parts are the first and second chapters. Omen of the Sun. Hey, this is one of those make bodies off an enchantment. May look unassuming and it's a common, but it works in this deck. Eldest Reborn. I like this card. One of my favorite sagas. It's one of the most interactive sagas. This one and the white one with Elspeth on it, that's also 5 mana. Those 2 are particularly my favorite because they mess with the board or they mess with people's hands. Each opponent sacks a creature or planeswalker. It's an edict effect. Each opponent discards a card. And then you get to put a target creature or planeswalker from a graveyard. Doesn't specify which one, so any graveyard into play under your control. Does something you love from top to bottom. Binding of the Titans. This just helps you find lands, and it kind of messes with graveyard synergies because you exile them. I don't know. I don't like this card. I could find some better to play. It's a quality of life card, and it's not even a good one at that. Farseek, fixing. Font of Fertility for fixing. I just don't like that it costs you 3 mana to do this one when you could do it for 2 mana over here. I think 2 mana is the standard for ramping. This doesn't fit that bill. I make exceptions for Cultivate and Kodama's Reach because you're guaranteed an additional land drop, and if you fell behind, it enables you to catch up, while this does not. Colony Heart Expedition. Yeah, I like this card. You get to put 2 lands into play for 2 mana, eventually. Getting the landfall trigger to put a quest counter, and then this triggers on the third is really easy to do. I haven't ran it in a while because normally when I ramp, I want to ramp immediately, but I think it's great in a a sealed deck for new players. Omen of the Hunt, God, it does the same thing of it's not ramping growth because it's 3 mana. And that's why I don't like it. Binding of the Old Gods. Okay, this is another one of my favorite sagas. Chapter 1, you destroy a non-land permanent someone controls. And then second, you search for any forest. Doesn't have to be a basic. Put in a field tapped. And then it's final, which I rarely get to take full advantage of. Makes it so your creatures have death touch on their turn. I usually play it for the first 2 triggers. It's just a dense card. That's why it makes it in my decks. Calyx of Hand of Destiny. His +1 lets you look at the top 4 for an enchantment and put it in your hand, so it's card advantage. And its -3 is it turns an enchantment or creature you control into an O-ring effect, and you exile someone's thing. It's flexible, but I don't really like it. It's -3. -7, return all enchantments from your graveyard to the battlefield. If you could pull that off, power to you, but I'd rather play Open the Vaults, or if you could afford it, Replenish. All right, let's look at the lands. Hopefully there's not a lot of tapped ones. This has more tapped lands than the Planeswalker deck, which I dislike, but not by much. Has one, and then it has the snarl kind of things. I'll let those go. I think that's fair. So we got the temples. I hate those. 4. Got these bounce lands. I hate these also. 5. Hate Croson Verge. 6, 7, 8, 9. Dang it. Come on. I wonder why they hosed this deck in terms of the quality. It has almost double the tapped lands compared to the Planeswalker deck. So kind of a little bit of a reversion there. I don't like going backwards. I want to go forwards.
No, you're still holding on. Let go.
All right, final thoughts of the deck. I think this deck's really well put together. Not the type of strategy I would have personally went with. They chose to go with going wide. I think it's because it's more affordable and realistic pricing, because if you wanted to go stacks, this deck would have gotten so incredibly expensive. That's why it's called stacks, because it's stacks of cash. Partially why those decks garner their names. Personally, I'm excited to play Anartha the way that I would play it. Out from the box, and you compare this to the Planeswalker deck and the Sliver deck, I think this deck would actually beat them both pretty badly. The card advantage package is awesome. Commander is a format where seeing cards is king, and this deck sees so many more cards than the first 2 decks by a large margin. You'll just have more stuff to do than your opponents will. It also went in a direction I didn't particularly see it going. So there's some creative marks for the designers of this deck too. Now, is it worth its current price tag? Let's go look it up. It's just barely more money than the Planeswalker deck. I'd say they're better than the Sliver decks and the Eldrazi decks by a huge margin. Honestly, I think the prices of these 2 decks should be bigger than these 2. I don't know why in the world it's like this. Clearly, there's like a casual player base that just like these more. But if you're looking to beat your buddies, these are the 2 decks you want to go. Have a good night. Bye.